Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Founders in Flight. Today I have Dr. Crawford in the studio. She runs Crawford Clinics and has been for 14 years. This is a different conversation. This is one that we're going to get a little bit psychoanalysis on you. Truly, I just found it to be really insightful, her perspective on some of the issues that founders face most often, whether that be imposter syndrome or just their understanding of themselves and their motivation. I think it's really applicable to anybody, but especially founders who are going through the process of building a business. I hope you enjoy. Dr. Crawford, so excited that you've taken the time to sit down with me today. I've always admired your practice. From afar, we don't really know each other all that well, but excited to get to know you more in this conversation and excited to dive in a little bit of your story. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh my gosh, it's my privilege.
Well, let me ask you first, can you kind of just lay the groundwork for us? Tell us who you are and, what do you do every day? And tell us a little bit of your story of kind of how you've gotten to where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents are multiple generations of entrepreneurs, and there's just something about the DNA of entrepreneurs. But I was a kid and my mom tried to teach me business and I was like, I don't want to learn that. I'm going to be an actress. And so I wish in retrospect I had listened, but I'd made inner vows because I know how much work goes into being a business owner. And I saw those hours from my parents. So I went to LA to be an actress and they prayed behind my back that God would dry up the desire and they didn't have to be the one to kill my acting dreams. I got jobs. It was fun. It was great. And then all of a sudden one day I was on stage auditioning for a job and it was just literally like the desire to act dried up and I didn't know what else to do with my life. And I called my parents. I'm like, it's the weirdest thing. It's like the desire to act dried up. It's so weird. And they're like, shocking. That's bizarre. They're so sweet to not tell me and kill my dreams. And so then that put me on a quest to figure out, well, what else am I going to do with my life? And I tried going to counseling because I always just kind of had issues, and I had some really terrible experiences with counseling. So I made a bunch of inner vows and judgments against that as well. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to try one more time. And I had a really phenomenal experience in therapy. And we got to unconscious roots where I was like, oh my gosh, there's trauma that I had no idea. And just by uncovering that, I was able to really gain freedom and momentum in life and move forward. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this with my life. And like many founders, you're good at the craft that you're good at, right? So I was a really strong clinical psychologist. I worked for other practices. I had a full practice, doing great, loving it, living in Dallas. And then I was presenting for a marriage conference on life, legacy, marriage, build your life, etc. And a psychologist said, hey, would you like to join our co-op where we all share the overhead? So the risk of being a business owner would be lower entry, not as scary. But I was like, oh, I have all these judgments against how many hours go into the reality of being a business owner. So I was like, turn that down. I don't think so. And then my mom is a great businesswoman and she was like, where you're at, you're always going to be capped. And you could fail, but at least you'll know. And at least you gave it a shot. And so I was like, all right. So I prayed about it and a mentor said, here's how I started my private practice. And I had to overcome a ton of fear and inadequacy, imposter syndrome of entering more into the business side instead of the art and craft of therapy. And so when I work with clients, normally that toggling between you're good at your craft and then now stepping into the business space is a really different skill. And so that was kind of my background. And that was 14 years ago.
Wow. 14 years. Okay. So 14 years ago, did you start Crawford Clinics back then? Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And then how many practitioners do you have right now?
Currently, ironically, we also have 14.
14? Oh, wow. There you go. Wow.
Not on purpose.
I want to say I planned that, but that's so incredible.
Yeah.
So if you were explaining to somebody, you had like an elevator ride with them and you said, this is what we do every day, how would you explain it?
Yeah. So we go backward, heal the past. If you were like a hard drive of a computer, you want to upgrade the operating system so that it syncs up with the software. So then people get to thrive today, but also create vision casting to fulfill purpose, to have meaningful marriages and wonderful parenting. And also, I believe there's a call of God on people. So when they get that fulfilled, there's this really great focus of like, I am on the planet for a reason, and it creates momentum and fun.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, do you Do you serve mostly clients that are local, or do you also meet with them virtually? My guess is it probably is much more widespread than just this area.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Absolutely.
are you only in the US, or are you also international as well?
Yeah, international. So the regulatory laws, if I'm operating as a psychologist, I'm licensed in Texas. So
Understood.
many of my clients fly in, or if we're doing executive coaching, or some of our team, they do business coaching or life coaching, then you can do that anywhere. Or some of our therapists are licensed in other states.
Amazing.
And so that can be virtual as well.
Amazing. So 14 years is quite a long time. Most businesses don't make it past the first 5. We just passed 5 in business. Yes. And I'm just so curious. Can you kind of break down for me some of the things that have been a little bit more challenging for you in your journey? What have been the obstacles that you've had to overcome? I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. You can talk for an hour if you want, but what are some of the things you faced along the way that you're particularly passionate about, I guess, talking about with other entrepreneurs so they can potentially avoid it themselves?
Yeah. Gosh, there is so many. So I would say number one was at the beginning as a founder, I was the janitor, the therapist, the bookkeeper, like I'm all the hats.
Yeah.
And so I never meant to scale this business. I was just starting to serve people. I love psychotherapy and I want to have the freedom as a business owner to see as many people as I can and impact as many people as possible. So that was the plan originally. And then I didn't realize how much I was working myself too much. And I didn't have really good work-life balance. And so I was going into burnout and cycles and I was like, what is going on? Like, I know I'm supposed to actually enjoy my life, you know, I'm making lots of money and I'm helping lots of people, but I was kind of losing like my sense of joy and laughter and wonder and adventure in life for myself. And so that was probably the first obstacle. And then when we started scaling, again, kind of starting with grassroots, I didn't have investors. So this has all been bootstrapped along the way. So we've had just like a lot of figuring out 12 people are doing like 17 roles, right? Like you always kind of have to toggle that. So it's been fun to now have better work-life balance. I feel like I've nailed that part. But then now like leading teams and scaling has been a completely different adventure. And we have an EOS coach, entrepreneurial operating system.
Yep.
And so we're structuring in that way. And that's been really fun. But then even when you bring new team members, you have to get that new chemistry. And then leading our therapist and making sure they're doing well, they feel, celebrated, because it used to be maybe 5 therapists and now we have 14. And so it's grown so fast in the last year of stewarding that well and not losing sight of the big vision as we're doing the day-to-day. And then I would say imposter syndrome has been a thread through all of it.
Interesting. I want to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
What are some of the what are some of the decisions you've made as you've gone through this journey of overcoming those obstacles that you look back and you say, that was a pivotal decision that I maybe didn't even know it at the time that I was making the right call. Right. I was taking that risk and I had no clue if it was going to completely tank the business or if it was going to help to, take us to the stratosphere. What were those decisions that you made along the way that really made a big difference?
Such a good question. Full transparency, becoming a clinical psychologist takes 10 years on the brief end. I started at 21 and that went all of my 20s and a good portion of my 30s of becoming a doctor. So when people are like, hey, are you going to hire life coaches? I was like, probably not, right? And so I felt in my heart one day that I believe God talks. And so I felt like he was like, you're marketplace pastors. And I was like, oh, that's a nice thought. I didn't think much about it. And then I was presenting at a conference and a woman that I highly respect, Stephanie Kelsey. I know what a strong leader she is. She's done large organizations in huge capacities. And so she asked me, would you ever hire life coaches? And I was like, no. And so I felt like the Lord said, ask her why she asked you. And so I followed up and she was like, because I'd like to work there. And I was like, what? You're a very impressive person. Why would you want to work for me? And so following that journey, we now have a handful of executive coaches, life coaches, and Spanish speaking, which is exciting, and then business coaches. And it's really created a well-rounded team versus just the mental health. And so we get to collaborate in a way that I didn't see that. I thought maybe that was in competition before and the markets are different, but now I see the synergy that God saw what I couldn't at the time of bringing together the life coaching and the therapy and how they actually funnel and support each other really beautifully.
That is amazing. Yeah, I had questions about that because I've always thought of you as this like general like can support me as an entrepreneur, but could support me as a human being too. And I feel like, did you ever feel like those two things, like did you ever worry that they were two things that didn't go together and that you were worried about putting those two things together?
Yes.
It seems like something that has been like a real unlock for you, but also something that was probably a risk at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for taking that step.
Thanks.
It seems like it's created something that's really memorable and also really resonates with an audience. Talk to me about the imposter syndrome thing for a minute.
For sure.
You mentioned that before our conversation, and you also have mentioned it here on the podcast. But what has that journey been like for you? How does that actually show up for you in real life still? And how do you navigate it? How have you gone about solving it for yourself?
Yeah. So I think it's funny because our unconscious mind doesn't give us labels like, hey, you're an imposter syndrome, right? Like that, it would be really convenient. And so there's moments where we just look back and we're like, oh, that's what I was dealing with. That's why I was feeling so much procrastination or struggling with going to networking or meetings or whatever. And again, I think because I was so strong in the therapy side, that the business side, and I'd made all those judgments against it. And I have a background of learning disabilities. So like, ADHD, dyslexia, all of those things. And so I never perceived myself as like, you're the smart girl. I'm friendly, I'm nice, I'm caring, I'm compassionate, all these wonderful things. But I never really identified with being the business owner. And so I am that and I'm good at it and I can do it. But I didn't realize that childhood stuff was still lingering down there until I started doing my own internal board meeting, which is part of restoring self-cohesion. So that's the last 20 years of my life is building a really innovative approach. Because a lot of people don't like counseling because they're like, I'm just going to sit there and complain to a paid friend who's going to tell me, oh, poor you in your childhood and blame your mother for all your issues. So the reason we don't like that at Crawford Clinics is I don't believe just looking back and feeling sorry for yourself and having a paid friend tell you that you're the victim is going to do you any good. But if we can teach people how to do an internal board meeting, so just like externally you have CEOs, you have COO, CIO. And so internally, we also have parts of self. And so the strong dominant parts of our personality, and this is what I get to lead my executives in executive coaching, that you may have dominant parts of you that show up and they can do that. But it doesn't mean there's not a cost to your soul of how much you're overcompensating for areas of insecurity. So early on in business, I had to recognize that in myself, that cycle of burnout wasn't actually me overworking myself. It was me overcompensating for fears, inadequacies, that I was staying busy into workaholism so that I didn't have to feel and acknowledge. And so it's a really huge honor and privilege to help executives restore enjoyment in life again. Because when we go back and we're like, oh, there's an actual dynamic that's still playing in your hard drive of the unconscious mind. We upgrade that, and there's a whole proven process on how to do that. And then now it's like your soul is just quiet. You're peaceful, content. Life is childlike awe and wonder and adventure again. So that's what it was for me. And then now unlocking it for clients has been a huge privilege.
Do you feel like the executives and also just ordinary folks?
Absolutely.
Do you feel like that's a common theme for a lot of them too?
Absolutely.
Tell me what are the things you listen for as you're coaching that can kind of identify that in somebody that they may not know it themselves yet, but you can kind of tell? What are some of those things that you hear? What are some things that people who are watching this could be like, oh, that might be me, And I'm just curious how you identify that.
Yeah. So if people describe a lot of ADHD symptoms, not that that's the only source, but it is a pretty common one, because if you think of an internal committee, if they're at war trying to all compete information at the same time, your brain's getting way too many signals. So when there's a lot of distractibility, disorganization, procrastination, hard to follow through or complete tasks, a lot of times it's actually if I put myself out there 100% and I fail, then it proves and confirms my greatest fear. So a lot of founders were naturally good at being the visionary and passionate to start something. But if there's a struggle in following through, people will say that's their personality or that's their founder temperament instead of realizing actually that's a growth opportunity and there's things we can work on. The next is how much stress people have when they go into a meeting. So like many of my founders in private moments, obviously, where they're like, I know I'm the founder. I know I built this business. I'm brilliant. It's successful. It's fine. And I still feel like I'm younger. I feel like I don't belong in this room. I feel like somebody else should be leading this meeting. And at any moment, someone's going to realize I'm a total imposter. I'm a fraud, and they're going to see through me. And these banks or these, donors or investors, they're going to back out at any second. So that kind of inner narrative lets you know probably there's an imposter syndrome going on. It can be worked on.
Wow, that's amazing. This is going to turn into a therapy session real fast.
It usually does.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Mine usually turn into branding consultations. So
that's awesome.
So tell me, for somebody who would say that they kind of identify with the things that you just spoke about, what are some of the first steps that you would encourage them to take to actually address those things? Maybe not solve it straight out of the gate, of course,
Sure.
Probably not possible. But what are some steps that you would recommend to somebody who's facing that? Because in the rooms that I sit, I also work with a lot of executives and founders in a different capacity,
Sure.
probably in the moments where they're more so displaying the things that you're talking about, or maybe trying to cover up their display of the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've even sat in rooms where I feel that way. But what are some things you'd recommend to them?
Yeah. So the counterintuitive human nature is we want to avoid pain and increase pleasure. So if you look at your behavior, whenever you're at complete peace, you're not going to crave a bunch of sugar and a bunch of alcohol or a bunch of like self-medicating things, right? You're not going to scroll social media if it is well with your soul. So at the moments where it's like, man, I'm really being avoidant. I'm doing doom scrolling, let's say, or, I'm just really craving sugary carbs. There's all these ways that our unconscious mind self-medicates. And so that's increasing dopamine, which is pleasure, by avoiding the tasks or the things that we know we should do, but we have fear and avoidance of being exposed that I don't really know what I'm doing, right? And so when I recognize it, just acknowledging, hey, I might be triggered right now. It is shocking how just a simple acknowledgement. Secondly, any journaling, what we call free writing. So some perfectionist temperament have a hard time with that because they're like, do I write it to you? Do I write it in proper pronouns? Like, what's the structure?
Sure.
Give me. Free writing is it's like your gut finally gets an opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
So in other words, if I have very dominant executive team internally, let's say, but then there's these quieter parts of like the nagging insecurity, the nagging fears, the nagging worry about the finances and how we're going to pay for the kids' college later. All of those quieter voices finally get acknowledgement. And then the third is you're now being kind and curious, saying, hey, me that is an imposter, I love you. It's okay. So instead of pulling away and trying to suppress and compensate, now it's leaning in intimacy, just like you would with a small child. So not multiple personalities, just younger parts of our soul that are like kind of insecure and afraid. And just by being acknowledged and seen, it's miraculous how much that just turns off that fight or flight response, the defensive response. And then it's like your operating system comes back online. So again, it's the opposite of what human nature, because we want to, be busy. We want to look for successful opportunities that I don't have to feel like a failure. Or the positive mindset movement that tells you just think positive, confess positive. That's nice, but it actually avoids and it suppresses. And so those things are running rogue unconsciously that just need to be acknowledged and befriended.
Wow. I'll set up my appointment later. But this is good. But before we hopped on the podcast and started recording, we talked about our shared love of Jesus. And I'm curious, what role do you think that can really play? What role does a deep and profound sense of peace and like understanding of like what our role is actually here on earth? Like, what do you notice about people who have that relationship with Jesus and are in like a founder's seat, for example? How does that actually like practically help and assist in being most effective as a leader? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, such a great question. I would say, ironically, for what we were just talking about, when I went to LA to be an actress, as much as acting is fantastic and I love it, I know for me personally, it was an unconscious attempt to not be me. I loved performing and being someone else. And I could have done that, but I don't think I would have been as fulfilled as really asking the Lord, hey, God, what did you put me on the planet to do? And so my life, I'm sure, probably would have had a margin of success in acting. That was fine, but it wasn't significant and meaningful until really seeking the Lord. Like, what am I on the planet for? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And it was like a treasure hunt. The Lord never gave me like, hey, in 10 years, you're going to own this business. It's going to scale to this. You're going to be speaking in podcasts and TV shows. It was more like, hey, follow me one step at a time. And it's built a life that I never could have imagined. It's like pinch me type of a feeling. But I know that I'm not that smart. I couldn't have envisioned all of this, nor could I have had the ability to get there without the sustaining grace of faith. Like, there really is a God who will back us up and support us. So for me, that was a big part of overcoming imposter syndrome, is when I'm talking to the part that is the imposter. I love you, me that believes that. Hey, I want to introduce you to my friend Jesus. And Jesus now brings comfort and restores proper identity, and then puts that part of me back in its original design. And now it's like my whole operating system comes back online versus the way our world does it. It's all like willpower, positive mindset, grind. And it's nice, but it's all based on your human effort and willpower, which can get you so far. But I think as a founder, being able to really confidently rest in the fact that I believe there is a God who heals people, who takes care of our business, who takes care of our finances. And even if I do mess up, that he's got my back. That's helped me be incredibly brave and make really big risks. Like in the last year, we just bought a brand new building in Southlake. That was a huge scale for us. And that was really risky and calculated. But I had a confidence and a peace. One, my parents are Christian entrepreneurs, so I just saw the testimonies of God doing it for them. They started in their in-laws fix this part. What's it called? Dining room. Yeah. So they started applying for things in their in-laws' dining room, and they started really small. They lived in trailers. They lived in garages as my dad would renovate homes. So they were at the poverty line, and I watched God do it in scale in their life. And so it created faith in me to believe that that was possible. And then they've been mentors in my life to say, no, go for it. Why not? Give it a shot.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think that, really understanding your true identity and really looking at things with that eternal perspective, I think can make a really big difference. Whenever I started my business, I was so, I think I've said this on like 3 or 4 of the podcast episodes or whatever. I missed the first 18 months of my daughter's life. And because I was working so hard. So hard to start the business and to achieve viability. And I always tell the story, the day that I filed my LLC paperwork for this business, I went home and my wife handed me a positive pregnancy test that day. So talk about motivation. Worked so hard in order to launch the business. And the way I visualize it is that I had this firm grasp of I will make this work. And part of me says, would I be here if I hadn't done that? Part of me wonders. And the other part of me is like, I wish I would have released sooner, because I feel so much more. Well, first of all, I feel so much more in love with my creator. I feel so much more like I have that deep founded relationship. My dad's a pastor. I grew up in the church, and I actually studied biblical studies first in college, and then I switched to graphic design, and then I switched to business. And I think what my fear was in letting Jesus into Mallard was that I would be somehow complicating it and maybe potentially taking away from our effectiveness or our excellence. It almost felt like you either have to choose to be faithful or you can choose to be excellent. And it wasn't until I actually realized that the pursuit of both of those things is actually possible. And actually, like, done in proper order, the pursuit of being faithful can actually like give you a lot of opportunity to be more excellent, whether that be in terms of serving your clients or, in our case, producing better work. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me to kind of navigate the things that we're talking about.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about the future of your business. Where are you guys headed? What are you most excited for as you guys step into this next chapter?
Yeah. So I am very much a visionary.
Me too.
Okay. So
This conversation could go for a while.
Yeah. Big picture. I have a dream binder.
Oh, cool.
So by every tab are the different dreams. And I made that when I was basically homeless right after grad school with no job, living at my parents' house going, okay, what am I going to do next? So a big vision and ridiculous, wonderful, I believe it, even though it's outlandish, is that by 2023, we will impact 100 million people.
Whoa.
And we will help deeply transform 1 million people to fulfill the call of God on their lives. So the vision is when we're writing books, and I'm saying we because it's a journey, to write the Restoring Self-Cohesion, create groups that'll be virtual groups. So that's where the coaches really came in, is they're going to lead our coaching, like our virtual groups. And then we have a vision for Crawford clinics to be in at least 10 states in the next 10 years.
Wow. How many are you in currently?
1.
Okay.
But I named by faith Crawford clinics.
Indeed.
And so then we have the fiction series. So in 2020, I started writing this espionage romance epic series, and it's going to be so fun. But kind of like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, where you're telling an allegory, but it's done in a very fiction, fun, espionage way. So it's really telling about our internal self-sabotage and like dynamics of turning against the self and all of those things we've talked about. So making that into a fiction book series that then, of course, is going to be red carpet, amazing fiction feature films.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Call me when that comes up.
Oh, you'll hear. You'll probably be a part of our marketing team. And then you'll have a QR code at the books and at the movies to get in those groups. And then we're going to mass multiply how many people learn how to steward their inner world, close doors to where they're being affected by things that they don't want to be affected by, and then increase their sense of vision and purpose. So one of the coolest parts of my job is a lot of times people come in for whatever reason. They might come in for marriage, anxiety, depression, adjustment, being a founder of stress, blah, blah, whatever they think they're coming in for. But most of the time, when you free up a part of your spirit, which is your true self, that's been operating based on a lie, let's say I'm a failure, I'm inadequate, I don't have what it takes, I'm an impostor, whatever it might be, then think of it as you have a literal committee member working against your design. So this part is going rogue, while the rest of you is going toward, all right, I got my MBA, I got my LLC, I'm moving forward in this direction in marriage, career, parenting, passion, but yet you have other parts of you running rogue. And so our job is to bring those parts conscious. And then once it's like this fog, this lie, all of these things come off, most of the time my clients become more entrepreneurial, more romantic, more brave, more present and engaged. And they get a sense of vision and purpose that before it was like they were striving against something. Now it's like that flow is returned. So that's what's been really fun is I believe we can scale that, which of course, as a visionary, I don't know exactly how that's going to happen, but that's our EOS big audacious goal.
I love it. I see the visionary now. I see it. So, okay, let's talk about being a visionary really quick. So the non-integrator, I'm also super familiar with EOS. So I'm also not an integrator. I am definitely a visionary. The way I say it is I can come up with about 100 ideas a minute if you let me. And so let's talk about that for a second. What sort of guardrails do you have in your life to be able to make sure that you don't execute on every single one of your ideas? Because certainly they're not all great ideas.
Right. Or right now.
Yes. Wait, what did you say?
Or they're not right now.
Oh, okay. Tell me what you mean.
Yeah, I think the timing is so important. So a lot of people will try to pressure me. Like once they hear one of my visions, they're like, oh my gosh, you need to do all these things right now, blah, 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 blah. And they feel an urgency that I'm like, oh, I don't have the grace for that right now. To have a vision is to know the long-term where we're going and then aligning everything, me and the team, that we're doing toward that vision. It doesn't mean all of them are at the same time. I can only be excellent at one or two things at a time. So in the last 3 years, I felt like the Lord was like, you're in CEO training. So I didn't didn't work a lot on my podcast. I didn't work a lot on speaking engagements. I didn't do a lot on the media front. And then in December, I felt like he said, now you're in media, and so that's going to be your focus. Your team is solid. Your business structure is solid. So I'm not writing on the fiction book. I'm not working on the movie right now, but that's the long-term vision of how that will come to pass. I think it's less about choosing the right idea and knowing the right timing for the idea.
That's really good.
Thanks.
Tell me, how have you gotten there in terms of developing that thought pattern? And then also, who is the one who provides you with discernment, or what are the mechanisms that you actually have to be able to help you identify as the visionary? Well, one, is it a good idea or a bad idea? And then number two, is it the right time or is it not? And if it is the right time, how are we going to go about doing that? Do you have an integrator in place? How have you structured your team and structured your life in such a way to where you can kind of channel your visionary to be most effective?
Oh, such a good question. We do have an integrator. So I have an executive team of 3. And fortunately, I don't have to be the integrator. But the discernment, I don't want to be cliche, but I really do spend a lot of time with the Lord. So I have like 2 to 3 hour quiet times in the morning. And I know not everybody can do that. And that's not that people should. I just do. And then I'll have a week where I take sabbatical the first week in January of every year. So like my clients know, my team knows, there's no talking to Dr. Crawford this week. And so during that time, I'm asking the Lord, what is our focus? What are we strategy? Like what is for now? What is for later? And so that's when I get that clarity. And then the day-to-day engagement of paying attention to what's really from the Lord versus what might be a squirrely, soulish idea of like, ooh, that's fancy. And then like, don't go after the shiny thing, like stay present with the real thing. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's been my genuine.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like you have a really good support system and also have really good self-discipline. I think that that's something that's really hard for founders just because life is messy and it's complicated and hard and different priorities, of course. But I guess what are some things that you would say to a founder who is early on in their journey, maybe year 1, not year 14?
Yeah.
What is something you would say to them if you could give them any sort of advice or encouragement as they're in the very initial stages of their business? What's something that's on your heart?
Gosh, I would say comfort is a saboteur. That there's parts of our inner world that love homeostasis, which just means balance. And so the conscious mind might be a dreamer, might be a visionary, you might have funding, you might have support, but the internal world really wants to keep balance and normalcy because then there's the illusion of control. So going out of my normal is going against all of that. And so that can feel wrong. It can feel scary. It can feel overwhelming. People can start having random panic attacks or heart attacks or not sleeping well. And so they might think that's lack of peace. Instead of going, all right, internal world, is it genuinely a lack of peace from the Lord? Or is this actually my fear of being out of control and stepping into the unknown? And every time we take a step up and we break that glass ceiling, you're really leaving your comfort zone and you have to be a novice all over again. And most of us love being an expert. We love showing up, being the good one, like the strong one. And so I think that's the fascinating thing about my journey is whether it was acting or being a psychologist or being a business owner or being in media, each area I've had to be really bad at it at first. And that's risky. That's hard on our ego. And to step into that and be willing to not be good initially and to do it anyway and be willing to fail and take that risk, the payoff is incredible because most people aren't going to make that investment. And then you get to live with that yield and that harvest. But when you're new at it and you're watching everybody else who seems competent and capable and they have funding and you don't, it's really easy to just go, I'll go back to that 9 to 5. The W-2 looks really great right now, and talk yourself out of maybe an adventure like I did. Like I talked myself out of it if I didn't have a really good support system around me, like a mom who said, hey, go for it. And most people don't have that. And so that's what's important is having the right people around us.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I think, back to my early journey and if I put myself in those shoes 5 years ago, I think about people like my in-laws who really pushed me into entrepreneurship and said like, go and do this thing. My wife was like a huge proponent of it.
Yeah.
People around me were really, really supportive. And those types of things are really like kind of that extra little that you need, that little kick to kind of get out there and actually do something about it. If you don't have that, I feel like there's just so many forces that are against you. So being careful who you surround yourself with, obviously, is really, really important. Out of curiosity, what's your natural comfortable zone, and which pieces of what you currently do are most uncomfortable for you?
Oh, that's a great question. You're a very good host. I am a 7 on the Enneagram.
Oh, okay.
So I am like play, people,
Are
relationships.
you a wing 8 or are you a wing 6?
Wing 6.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have dreamt to be an 8.
Okay. Yes, indeed.
I tell God, please make me an 8. I'm the most 6 you've ever met. I'm so loyal.
Yes,
I'm not the anxious side of 6, but the very loyal, committed, relational. But yeah, I'm super 7. And so I want to be playing with all the people and doing all the things. And so being faithful to steward a business and write books by myself alone, that is not glamorous for a 7. That's really hard.
Yeah.
When God was like, you're in CEO training, I'm like, do you literally hate me? Like, that's mean. And then a long time ago, he was like, after my doctorate, I had to get a psychoanalysis. So it's called Christian Integration and Psychoanalysis, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, that's the meanest thing you could ever do to a 6, 7. Like we don't want to be alone learning mean esoteric theories. Like that's not kind. So I have really been faithful in doing the things I don't like, which in Myers-Briggs language, if you know that, they always say you're actually moving toward the middle for health. And so it's created a lot of balance. Like 7 naturally doesn't want to do hard and they don't want to do pain. So a 7 is the opposite of what a normal therapist would ever choose, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to be a life coach. I want to be positive. I want to tell you everything's good and you just have a good mindset and you don't have to ever go back and work through trauma and root issues. And so to have to do that in my own life, I was like, okay, touche, point taken. And then now to have to learn all of these skill sets so that now you grow your capacity and there's an ease and a grace to it that it doesn't bother me anymore as much as it used to 15 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing. Speaking of Enneagram, what is a number that if you're talking to somebody and they say, I'm this number, you're like, ooh, I have thoughts for you.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like anytime somebody says, I am, I love 8s. I love working with 8s because I always feel like I grow when I'm around 8s who challenge me and tell me all the ways that I'm wrong. And I'm a 3, wing 2.
Okay.
So let's do that. How about you give me some encouragement based off of what you know about Enneagram 3s?
Yep.
Wing 2. What are some of the areas that I should watch out for? What are some of the areas that you feel might be unique superpowers based off of that just simple input?
Yes.
Do you know enough about Enneagram to do this?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
For the record, it's not a real psychology test, but it is a fun social
That's a good
test.
Caveat.
So I think it's fun to talk about. The 3 is the achiever. And so not accidentally overworking yourself or finding identity, worth, satisfaction in your checklist or your achievements. And so making sure identity is really solid and separate from that. So a lot of times for other people, the achiever needs to go through seasons where they're kind of in the wilderness and they don't get to achieve. And there's a sense of contentment and sense of deeply rooted belonging without an achievement or a task list or something I can achieve. So when that gets solid, achievers are fantastic. And they're like, oh, task, I'll do that. And then the helper, they have to be careful, the wing 2. The helper has to be careful to not lose their identity in being so helpful, so productive, so wonderful for others. And there can accidentally be a root of resentment if they don't bring up their own needs. And so all of us, 7s included, we all have a dark side if we're not careful. And this was something that the Lord spoke to me, that my natural strength as a mercy, it's beautiful, but if I don't ever mature in that gift, then I actually will operate out of the flesh and I'll do things that I think are right, which will lead to a path of destruction. So there were things early in my life that I thought, oh, like everybody nice, mercy feelings. And it's like, no, actually people need truth. They need hard words. You know, when I've told my clients hard feedback, usually they look at me and like, thank you. Because intuitively, we kind of know that's down there. And so if we're not honest with whatever our gift is, and we just try to please or perform or serve or achieve or have fun or drive, but we're not doing the other side of like, yeah, but also I have needs, and it's okay to recognize that, own that, and take responsibility, and not accidentally become a martyr internally, growing in resentment and then feeling taken for granted and never working on your own goals. So that could be the dark side of a 3-wing 2.
Well, now I'll just sign up for a whole year's worth of so I just such a riveting conversation for me, just because I feel like this like relationship between like almost like my mind, my heart, and honestly my mouth. Like I just like all of those things, like how I process information, how founders I guess really display themselves, and then also their relationship with themselves, I think is something that a lot of people think about, very few people talk about. And also very few people make investment to actually to understand those things, to actually seek that betterment out, to be able to understand themselves better so that they can be the most effective leader, the most effective partner, the most effective person. And just super interesting to talk about. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
And also just know that I'm a huge fan of what you're building. I truthfully, we met at an event probably about a year ago, and just have always really admired what you were building. I reached out to you to be on this podcast just because I just really think that Crawford Clinics is doing something really special in our community. I love local businesses, and the fact that you're really you're growing so fast. I'm excited about that for you. And any way that I can help, of course, let me know.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I love Mallard Agency.
Thanks. I paid you to say that. Appreciate the time today.
Thank you.